Alright, y'all. This seemed like a really interesting video. Hopefully my audio and everything is. I've done a few test videos and stuff. I think it should all be good. Especially if I don't mumble too much and I just speak up. I should be fine. So, let's, yeah, I want to react to this video. I like Mr. Beat. I've been a fan of his. He's an interesting, person in terms of what he does. Especially a lot of the presidential videos, especially, those are always fun. All the ones he's done about all the presidential elections. So he just has a very interesting, especially historical point of view. I think he is currently still like a historical history teacher too, like a high school history teacher or whatever. So, sorry, but yeah, so he's a cool dude. And talking about Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan, I'll admit, yeah, I was a pretty big Joe Rogan fan too until recently. I mean, even now, I mean, I don't want to say I'm not a big fan of his. I'm just a bit disappointed with a lot of the route he's gone with some decisions and stuff, especially being so explicit with like the Trump endorsing and all that. Like, it's kind of weird. I think it's kind of weird, especially like all that's really weird. Like post like January 6th, I think it's really weird. People being so cool with that in that way, but I mean, especially, I mean, it's one. That's a whole other video. It's a whole other video. It's a complicated thing, but anyways, let's get to this. I think it's very interesting.
I'm Mr. Beat, and I have another confession to make. I used to be a really big fan of Joseph James Rogan. Like, a really big fan.
Me too, dude. Me too. I feel that. I feel this.
Yeah, that's the guy. Joe Rogan, the comedian, actor, UFC commentator,
Yep.
reality TV host, and most famously, podcaster. I'm serious, William.
Yep.
I loved him. I loved him like dogs love to smell dog pee. Okay, maybe that was a weird metaphor, but for a period of about 8 years of my...
No, not for me. Especially, I literally work at a dog daycare right now, so that's literally like the perfect metaphor. I don't. Yeah, I guess we keep the uh closed captions on. Why not? Unless people don't like it, future videos, let me know. But yeah, that's hilarious. That's a hilarious metaphor.
life, I was constantly listening to Joe's podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience.
And the elites themselves believe they're racing using human technology to try to take our best minds and build some type of breakaway civilization where they're going to merge with machines.
Yeah, the Joe Rogan Experience. During those 8 years, I pretty much listened to every single episode. Well, other than the UFC and Fight Companion episodes.
Yep.
I couldn't care less about.
And every so often, I watch every one of those every so often, depending, especially the Eddie Bravo ones. I listen to all that stuff. Even though I wasn't into like the conspiracies, it's just fun.
And I wasn't the only one, dude. There are others. The Joe Rogan Experience is one of the most popular and influential media programs in history. I'm sure you've heard of it.
It's helped influence my personal life, even up fairly recently. I mean, when you had Guru on.
And remember, there are.
That was influential for me. That was like the first time I listened to something like that with him on there. I actually haven't heard of him.
And he's dead. Hundreds of millions, if not billions, of people at this point have listened to at least one episode of the Joe Rogan Experience. It's helped launch the careers of countless guests and dominated the culture. Helped presidents get elected. I listened to Joe Rogan so much it felt like he was legit an actual friend of mine. You're looking at a picture taken of me and a woman who, for some strange reason, married me. You may know her as Mrs. Beat. This picture was taken in 2014, and if you asked Mrs. Beat what she thought of Joe Rogan at that time, she probably would have rolled her eyes and said that she was annoyed that I constantly the conversation we had.
Oh, poor me.
That I was listening to the other day. Oh man, you should check out the latest episode of Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan had a guy on who thinks he's seen Bigfoot 6 times. Joe Rogan says we should take more vitamin D to increase our life expectancy.
Matt, shut up about Joe Rogan.
For people who are watching who may think that I'm making this up, convince them that I actually was a really big Joe Rogan fan.
In preparing for this, I searched Joe Rogan in my email on August 14th, 2013. You were excited that he might do meet and greets, and you were wanting to.
Oh, this is
meet
funny.
him.
But eventually, Mrs. Beats
Dang.
got into him too. I even convinced her to let me spend way too much money to see him perform his stand-up comedy live in Kansas City back in 2018.
That's
But
funny.
by 2020,
I haven't done anything this extreme, alright? So I never got that. I never quite to the point of giving him man money. I'm not gonna lie.
With him more and more. By the end of 2021, I had stopped listening to him altogether. The parasocial relationship
I think around then, I
over.
hadn't really listened to him much either. Maybe every so often, like an episode in the blue, once in the blue mood.
I'm excited to say that this video is once again sponsored in part by Cook Unity. As you can see, they ship more food.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna skip the ads at least, because that's one of the benefits of, I think, yeah, it's watching me do this, I guess. But yeah, sorry. No offense to Cook Unity. Man, unless y'all want to sponsor me, y'all sponsor me, then I won't definitely skip his ads.
Before I explain to you why I stopped listening to Joe Rogan, I think it makes sense to explain why I started listening to him in the first place.
Sure.
The day was December 16th, 2011. I tuned into The Tonight Show to watch Jay Leno interview one of my favorite
Yo, this is way too real.
Paul was a popular congressman.
Me too, man. I went through the Ron Paul phase as well. I feel ya.
Joe Rogan to enthusiastic.
I was already into Joe Rogan I think before this point.
Did not see this coming.
You see, before December 16th.
Like before, for me, I had know about Ron Paul and Joe Rogan before this point. I mean, Ron Paul first in 2008, although I wasn't really into him until a little bit later. By that point, that moment for me was more of a solidifying of like these two different worlds of Joe Rogan and Ron Paul. And so I guess like I get like him being political in general. I will say it's just weird going from Ron Paul to Trump. It really is. Like a lot of Prince. I mean, I get it, both capitalism, blah blah blah, but like, yeah. And I'm just gonna let him explain his story.
2011. I didn't really like Joe Rogan at all.
Really?
Two things mainly: news radio.
See, I never watched his stuff about. I watched some Fear Factor. I knew him as the Fear Factor guy.
In fact, I thought he was annoying at best and.
Yeah, so for me, it was like, I didn't know about the show. It was just Fear Factor. And for me, it was like, oh, okay, the Fear Factor guy has a podcast. I was like, one day, I was like, hey, let's just listen to what the Fear Factor guy has to say. And I just kind of caught myself, coming back to, more and more episodes, especially as he got more and more interesting guests. And then eventually it was like, oh, I guess this is a legit deal. And for me, I never saw him like when he was at his house. It was by then he was already got a studio and everything, and obviously had been very bald. I barely remember like not bald Joe Rogan. But anyways, I know what he means by being annoying, obnoxious, and blah blah. Yeah, especially when he's younger.
Obnoxious at worst on Fear Factor. I couldn't stand the guy.
But then here he is on Jay Leno endorsing my boy Ron Paul, and I was like, maybe I should revisit this Joe Rogan fella.
Soon after this, I noticed.
Interesting. So he liked him because of Ron Paul. I kind of liked him independent of Ron Paul. Actually, yeah, I liked him.
Give it a try.
I was hooked.
I mean, don't get me wrong.
Though it helped that he liked him.
Back when Brian Redband was on the program, producing the audio had issues.
Ryan, yeah, Brian.
We do. Oh, good.
Oh, Brian.
I don't know how to use Windows, little Jimmy. We just switched over to Windows.
Many of his guests seemed to be under the influence of drugs. Many of them didn't know what the heck they were talking about half the time.
See, I didn't watch it like at this point as much, yeah.
And good, open-minded people. And I felt like I was eavesdropping on some really intriguing conversations. Plus, it was like a peek behind the curtain. Before podcasts like the Joe Rogan Experience, we rarely got such intimate glimpses into the private lives of big-time Hollywood celebrities. I got even more into the podcast.
Yeah, I didn't watch those episodes. So I guess I do mess up the timing line, memory-wise. That all was YouTube videos, man. I remember this one, Carl Hart.
Journalists,
Carl
That's
Hart's
it.
one of my
But
favorite
here's
ones.
the thing.
Brian
Whenever
Cox,
Joe had guests on
Neil
who
deGrasse
were
Tyson, one of my
experts
favorite
in
ones as well.
specialized
All those
fields,
guys are my
he
favorites.
didn't pretend to know more than them. He showed humility. He
Mm-hmm.
shut up and let them talk. When he did talk, he often asked questions. And here's the most important part. Joe was curious.
Mm-hmm.
In those early years,
Joe,
his
Curious Joe.
curiosity
Curious
guided
Joe.
each and every interview. He had people on whom he clearly disagreed with, but heard them out anyway. Sure, he still had stuff he passionately cared about, like the legalization of recreational drugs.
Hey, but that's a legitimate moral cause, I think.
If he didn't know much about a topic, he shut his
The
mouth
UFOs
and
is just fun.
listened.
That multiverse might be infinite and eternal
Where are they?
outside of our universe.
Ah, that was a good episode
Of course
too.
it's possible.
I understand. I'm not
Okay.
questioning it.
Okay, no,
I
no.
just would like you
Here's
to
one.
define it.
Well, I can't remember that
Does it mean
professor's
there's
name, but
nothing or no
Cross,
thing?
Lawrence
We can't
Lawrence
we can't
Cross.
even wrap our
Yeah.
head around nothing because we think it's a thing. That there's
Yeah,
no
he's a
thing,
good
there's
one, too.
never a thing.
Right.
Right. But how do we, or why don't we just say we don't know? I don't know enough about astrophysics, about space
Why
travel,
don't we say we don't
about
know?
the science that's, the work that's been done, about how to get a rocket to the moon and back. We definitely don't know enough.
Now, I should say he also had people on who were not experts in their fields, but he believed that they were
Rude,
experts
but
because
man,
wanted to
what do you guys say about Grant
Also,
Hancock?
when he
That was one of
did
my
tend
favorite
to have
episodes.
actual experts
Mitch
on,
Kaku?
They tended to be experts who were just better at talking than most of their colleagues. It didn't mean they were more knowledgeable than their colleagues.
Hey,
They just could
whoa!
get
Don't be
stuff
saying that
done.
about Mitch
He
Kaku.
grew to like
Hey.
experts. He'd invite them back on.
Okay, what's his name? He's CIA dude.
Talk about stuff they
I disagree with him, but
about. Despite
respect
all
him.
that, Joe was a likable person.
But I know where his
Always
criticisms are coming
so
from.
down to earth and authentic.
Oh man, a lot of these criticisms, I don't necessarily disagree with them. I kind of do, but kind of don't. It's complicated. Like I know why people have these criticisms that they do. I don't know if I necessarily share them, but I understand the reasoning, and I don't think it's necessarily wrong. I don't know. It's hard. It's difficult. This is a difficult process. All right. It's a difficult
He
process.
wasn't constantly trying to push any agenda. He constantly admitted that he didn't know what he was talking about when it came to most things. By the way, that's all of us. All of us don't know much about almost everything. And that's okay. Overall, though, I just
Nope, it's not okay.
appreciated
Know
Joe's
everything.
almost childlike curiosity and devotion to learning.
I sometimes have to
As
remind
of
myself
2019,
I'm allowed to
though,
not know
I
things.
did begin to notice that he tended to mostly have people on the show who he already agreed with, and if he disagreed with a guest, even if they were a friend, he'd push back a bit much further than I'd like. But things really went downhill for the show quickly during the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yeah.
When's the first time you remember me saying something negative about Joe Rogan?
Well, that would be around the pandemic.
I swear, that pandemic broke so many people's brains. And don't get me wrong,
Well,
I get it.
sometimes
It
we're
was a
super
difficult
ahead. That's
and
weird.
stressful time. Millions of people died. The lockdowns
Yeah.
sucked. We had to
Oh, yeah.
sacrifice many of our freedoms. In my opinion, this especially seemed to upset a lot of privileged folks who weren't used to sacrificing their freedoms. But due to so many folks going through hard times,
Yeah, man. Man,
That
Mr. B.
included
I don't
many
know.
celebrities who
I don't know. It's also
influenced
the balance of
millions others
government
to become
power
more
versus
radicalized. And
people, and I
let me
get
be
it.
clear here.
But
When I
there is
say
health stuff as well.
radicalized, all I mean is that they had views more radically different in opposition to the status quo.
Sure.
It's not necessarily a bad thing
No.
to have radicalized views. I mean, we do need to get radicalized if things get bad enough. Joe did not
I mean,
lockdowns and
at a certain point, you gotta think of it. Radical is only, you gotta remember, radicalized is only mean like it's only as like ideologies and all this stuff are only like subjective in the sense if they're in relation to like the society and the thing you're in. So like think of it like this. Um, so there's a time where it was radical to think that a person of color should be free. Shouldn't be a slave. Abolitionism, all this sort of stuff, and just Also, women's suffrage. These were at some one point considered radical, but it's very nowadays are to us considered no-brainers. So, you know, yeah, that's what it is. And yeah, so it depends what you're talking about. In some ways, some people are very radical in quote unquote good ways and in other quote unquote bad ways. That's also a lot of it's ideologically related, but anyways.
Public health restrictions one single bit. He was absolutely devastated that he had to cancel all his shows and his fun plans. And throughout March and April of 2020, during those particularly restrictive times, he spent most of the time on his podcast complaining about how all of us couldn't just go where we wanted or do what we wanted.
They're treating everybody like babies. This is what it is, man. They're treating everybody like you're not allowed to make your own decisions, including business owners that have spent a ton of money opening up these outdoor cafes and outdoor restaurants, and then they don't even supply.
This is why you gotta be careful with the state, how you use it.
Essentially autocrats.
Because you're gonna make people even like Joe Rogan, you can radicalize them and towards not good ways.
Well, tell everybody what you do, Michael.
Well, thank you.
How do you do it? I mean, that's easier said than done for sure, but
tracking infectious diseases down, trying to stop them, trying to understand where they come from so we can make sure they don't happen in the first place.
He had Dr. Michael Osterholm on, an internationally recognized expert in infectious diseases. You can go back and watch this episode. It is aged like wine. Holds up very well. Michael Osterholm is truly an expert.
I think I do remember the episode. Yeah. You know, now you mentioned it.
At the time,
Mr. Beats. This is why I love Mr. Beats. I may not fully agree with him with particulars.
He combative against
he does it.
This time. The second time Osterholm was on, I was astounded by how arrogant Joe seemed, despite the literal freaking experts across the table from him remaining humble.
Does the vaccine cause any pericarditis?
No,
or
none. We've
none?
seen zero. Zero cases. Zero cases pericarditis, zero cases of arrhythmias. But the virus does it.
Zero. That's not what I read. I read
this
whole thing about vaccinated people in Israel. Like that there was a giant surge of vaccinated people.
No, the surge.
I mean, I don't mind him being a little combative like this.
He hasn't had him on ever since. But let's go
I don't like him that he's never had him on ever since. I agree. I don't mind him like being a little bit like, I've read here and here from this source. What do you think about this source? Is this like an illegitimate source? Like that's why I would have done it.
Doing everything remotely. Even
I think
Joe,
he might have.
His remote guest this time was someone he had on his show before, Dr. Peter Hotez, an internationally recognized expert on vaccines and tropical disease control. If you go back and watch the episode, again, practically every episode is still up. If you go back and watch it, you'll notice that Joe is still mostly trying to learn and staying quiet, but he's also visually frustrated.
How long can we go? I mean, if look, let's take economics out of it. What would you think if there was no concern whatsoever about economic loss and the damage to the economy?
Your subtitles are a bit off.
What would you recommend in terms of just from purely from a medical perspective?
While this episode has also aged like wine,
I don't remember this one.
Is also truly an expert who forecasted the pandemic and the response accurately. He later became the target of a backlash
got Kitty behind me.
And yep, Joe hasn't had him on since.
You see, Joe apparently thought
maybe coughing up a hairball. Don't cough a hairball up in my bed, please. Thank you.
And he felt like he didn't need to teach his audience anything new about it either.
Most of the COVID-19 coverage after this was reactionary. He didn't have experts on. He had just people who didn't know much about the virus or pandemic giving their opinions about it, backed up by little evidence. It was
I didn't watch much during this time, so it's hard for me to say.
And then on December 31st, 2021, Joe
I watch it here and there.
This guy on.
Dr. Robert Malone.
Used to be a respected doctor who helped make mRNA vaccines and furthered medicine research. However, the pandemic appeared to break his brain too. He began spreading a bunch of misinformation about the safety and effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines. He misrepresented data and used his credentials to gain.
I don't know if that's simple, but I get what he means. Overall, yeah. I mean, I think it's more complicated than that. especially when he's someone like Robert Malone. It's hard to just say that about something like that. I want to give these people a little bit more credence than I think like a lot of the more left-leaning folks. Which Mr. B is kind of like that. I think he would describe himself as like kind of center left. And I in some ways am lefty too, but I don't know. I'm like very libertarian and very all sorts about that life. Anyways, I don't want to keep tossing this, and let's keep going. We're almost done with this video. I've overall liked it, despite what it may seem like I may be like arguing against this stuff. No, I love Mr. B. I love Mr. B. I actually probably, despite what it may sound like, I probably actually, realistically, I do really would probably agree with like 80%, 90%. Honestly, honestly, yeah, he pretty much nails it from what I know, from what I can personally be like, yep, that seems right to me. So, anyways.
Quite a following online. By the end of 2021, Joe Rogan had already made up his mind about COVID-19 vaccines. He didn't like them. So when Joe found out about Malone, he seized at the opportunity to have him on the podcast to talk trash about them. And sure enough, Rogan's audience generally ate this misinformation right up.
Well, this was the last straw for me. I haven't listened to Rogan ever since. Well, except for the Osterholm episode and the Mike Judge episode. What can I say? I love Mike Judge.
Over the past 4 years, if you look at the guests, they're mostly just people.
See, I've listened to some of the Lex ones. I mean, I've listened to a number of them through this time.
From the period of about 2014 to 2019, you'd see a big variety of guests.
Right.
Since then, it's mostly the same cast of characters, man. Oh, look, there's that guy again. Oh, look, her again. That guy again. Just as troubling to me, over the past 4 years, Joe has generally shown a complete lack of humility. A humility that legit used to be a big...
I want to see Joe Rogan react to this video. That would be incredible.
Now, at this point, you might be thinking,
especially on the podcast.
You just don't listen to him because you don't agree
Actually,
with political views.
he really needs to invite Mr. B on here and be like, "What do you mean, man? Like, I want to see that."
Well, that's not correct at all. In fact, I probably still agree with the vast majority of Rogan's political views.
Right.
Many people argue that Joe Rogan's
probably same.
Have moved
for the most part. I mean,
to the right in recent years.
It's complicated, but
I actually don't think this is true.
My views are complicated.
Been a left-leaning libertarian, much like
yes.
myself, actually. He
still
same. Passionately supports Bernie
I feel
Sanders and Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
That left-leaning libertarian life is tough.
And please don't forget this, all three of them still lean to the left politically. He recently had a sitting Democratic senator on as a guest. I think the difference now, though, is he's done adjusting his political views. I think his political opinions are pretty much set in stone. He's done learning new information about public policies. He's done keeping an open mind about politics, and that's a big freaking problem.
Right.
Put simply, Joe Rogan's curiosity is gone. That childlike curiosity, those inquisitive conversations that drew me to his podcast in the first place, they're just gone. What remains is a dude who is less open-minded and less willing to learn new stuff.
For real.
And I get it. It's not just Joe Rogan. I think the whole culture is less curious than it used to be.
Yeah. Agreed.
I know why, actually.
The YouTuber Alec Watson of the phenomenal channel Technology Connections recently released a video explaining what I've been pondering for several years now. His main hypothesis in the video is that we've collectively grown way too comfortable with having algorithms feed us everything.
And you know what? I agree with Alec.
I am seeing evidence that an increasing number of people are so used to algorithmically generated feeds that they no longer care to have a self-directed experience that they are in control of. The more time I spend interacting with folks online,
I see that.
The more it feels
I'm somewhat an exception. I mean, I get comfortable with algorithmic stuff to some extent, but I do try to keep mindful to switch it up every so often with stuff for sure. That's why I even try to do it even with my content creation even be that way. So I'm doing something a little different with this one.
In a period of history in which so many
Sort of
people
political,
pride
but it's
themselves
also
as
like,
being distrustful
more
of those in
cultural.
power, or being so-called red-pilled, we trust random people on the internet more than ever. Worse
Yeah,
yet, we
I try to
trust
be
random
skeptical. See, I think that's one
on the
reason.
internet more than ever. How many of us ask Siri or
Okay, I'm trying to not pause it too much, but like, for real, this is why maybe one reason I'm less impacted than a lot of other people in that regard. I've always been skeptical of random people on the internet, and I always will be. Like, in that regard, like, who are you, rando? Like, you gotta be careful. It's like I'm not gonna necessarily trust a rando. You gotta earn that stuff a little bit. Like, earn that trust, at least.
Alexa or Google a question and just accept it as truth. Sorry if I said anything off, by the way, by just doing that. Heck, how many of us look up anything on a daily basis anymore? Instead, algorithms spoon feed us what we want to see because we fear a life without dopamine. And who can blame us? Life is incredibly difficult out there for many of us right now. We already struggle so much that algorithms allow us to escape from that misery. But we don't realize that those same algorithms perpetuate the misery.
It's very much like just desire and karma and dharma and how life is. It's like our life is suffering because we keep desiring and generating the negative dharmas and karmas. The same with algorithms, it's just the same thing over and over again.
Or maybe he just likes money.
Oh, I like money.
I don't know. Regardless, I stopped listening to Joe Rogan.
Maybe a little column A, column B. I mean, I get it. I think it's probably maybe a little bit of both. Because I could have seen him totally being like, because he admires Dave Chappelle so much.
I know this because you clicked to watch this video. Sure,
I appreciate, yeah. He's going to advertise his stuff. You should check out Mr. Beat. Subscribe to him if you haven't already. I mean, I don't know why you would be watching this if you hadn't. It'd be kind of weird. But, I mean, I'm not judging, honestly. But if you haven't subscribed to Mr. Beat, do so. Please subscribe to me if you haven't already on just YouTube, and follow me on Twitch. Just Tupac comes the username. So I'm going to stop this recording now. So hope you all have a good one on YouTube. Peace.